Dr. Anderson did a fake prostate exam on him, made him ejaculate through a fake prostate exam.
He was sticking his fingers in their anuses.
In their anus.
And how many people did he do this to? Do we
Well,
know?
hundreds.
All right, everybody, welcome to another great episode of Cases Gone Wild with me, your host, Jon Marko, brought to you by Marko Law. We have an awesome, crazy, wild show for you today. We have an awesome guest, candidate for governor, former attorney general, that's the top lawyer in the entire state of Michigan for the government, and a just all-around tenacious, intelligent, wonderful lawyer and human being. We have Mike Cox on the show. Mike, thanks for coming.
Damn, John, how am I going to live up to that intro? Come on, man. Don't put all that pressure on me.
You deserve it. You deserve it.
All right.
We're going to hear some of the craziest stories from Mike's career. By the way, a former Marine. I forgot to mention that.
Always a Marine.
Always a Marine. Thank
Yes.
you for your service.
Thank you.
One of the hardest, I think, most elite.
Not one of, the.
Okay,
All right.
okay. I had a Delta Force guy tell me once they had an argument with the Marines, so that's why I say that. But,
Okay.
But one of the top lawyers in Michigan. Remember, you can watch us on the YouTube channel and on the website at markolaw.com on Cases Gone Wild, and where you can hear all your podcasts. Mike, thanks for being on the show.
John, it's great being here. You know, brother, you're killing it as a lawyer, and so it's kind of fun to be here.
Thanks, man. It's fun to have you. I've been trying to go for a long time. I know you're so busy.
I've been ducking you. Yeah, I've been ducking you. I hear you have hard questions. So.
This show is all about fun and entertainment and knowledge. So we're really happy because you have all those things. And I looked at when we were discussing some story ideas. Like we're gonna have to have you back for like a Mike Cox part 2 because there's no way we can fit it all in an hour. There's just no way.
All right. Well, we'll see how well you treat me first.
all right. Fair enough. So tell us, you're running for governor right now.
Right now.
In the Michigan governor's race, right? Which is a hotly contested race. We have all kinds of people. We have former Mayor Duggan entering the race. So tell our listeners a little bit about yourself, kind of your sell pitch, and why you would make a good governor for the people of the state of Michigan.
Hey, bro, I'm running for this simple reason. My parents are immigrants, legal immigrants. They both came here to Michigan because they thought America was the greatest nation in the world and that Michigan was the greatest state. And that was just a generation ago. My mom's still alive. Literally, my dad walked across the Blue Water Bridge, hitchhiked down to Detroit to meet a sponsor.
No way.
No way. And at end of 49, he gets drafted right away. 6 months later, go to Korea. So it's like, hey, should I stay in Michigan but stay in Michigan, I got to go fight in Korea, or I can go home. He says, I want to stay in Michigan, so I'll go fight in Korea. And now look at us, right? We're second in unemployment. Our fourth graders read at a level that's lower than all but 2 states, and it's not their fault. It's the adults' fault. And so, we need leadership. And I see all the great things my parents saw. 4 Great Lakes, 10,000 inland lakes. We're on an international border, a trained workforce, more engineering talent than anywhere in the world almost. And yet we're lingering at the bottom. And I'm optimistic. I believe we can change that around with a little Marine will and spirit. Yeah,
well, tell us a little bit about your kind of path. You used to be the attorney general for the state of Michigan. So politics is kind of in your blood. You have family. I know both of your brothers. Both are judges, or both were.
Right.
Kevin Cox is a judge in Wayne County Circuit Court, the biggest county in Michigan, for those who don't know. And your brother, Sean Cox, was the chief judge of the federal court here for the Eastern District of Michigan, the biggest federal court in Michigan. So, and you, were the former attorney general, and you ran your own firm. You've had a lot of big cases. So how'd you get here?
It's my parents. I know, like, your dad, Professor Aquinas taught theology, instilled in you, like, the love of learning and chasing down the truth, right?
I wouldn't be here without him.
You wouldn't be here without him. Same thing with me. My old man was a carpenter, right? My mom was a maid, right? Her sister and they had funny accents, and rich people loved having maids with funny accents back in the day. And they just made it through, and they instilled in us, hey, starting at 7 or 8 years old, you got to get your own job, cut lawns, free press routes when I was 9 years old.
Yeah.
I was a shoe shine boy at a country club. I picked up garbage, joined the Marines, and it was that work ethic, that idea that you just chase your purpose that they instilled in us. And they said in America, in Michigan, you can be anything you want to be. And that's part of why I'm running for governor, because I have so many friends whose children don't feel that now. And, my grandchildren go to school in Mississippi, and they get a better education than the kids in my neighborhood in Livonia. And that wasn't the case. And so when I joined the Marines, it just kind of solidified what my parents instilled in me. And I loved arguing when I was a kid. Loved it. And my old man and my mom, they pushed us to argue. My dad would take contrary positions at the dinner table just to poke at us, right?
Yeah.
And make us defend ourselves. Preparing us. And so I was Irishmen are always cops, or were then, right? Yeah. And so my parents said, no, that cops are great, but you have to be something different than that. So I became a prosecutor, which was the next best thing. Spent 13 years in Wayne County. I don't know, probably did at least 150 jury trials.
Probably the busiest prosecutor's office in the state, one of the country.
Absolutely. I ended up running all the I ran the homicide unit. I had 14 lawyers each and every day. They just went every single day, did murder trials. And I probably did, 50. And I would tell people I loved my job and it was fun. And they would look at me like there was something wrong with me. Right? But when I mean fun, and you get it, it's like the challenge.
Yeah.
And also delivering.
Fulfilling.
It's like every single day I had a purpose that was important, especially to the victims, to the people I represented. And by and large, most of them were poor African-American folk, who had no one to look out for them except for the prosecutor. And, it was a great job. And I'm sitting around for 13 years. I love it. I worked for this goofy Democrat, Mike Duggan, at the time. He got elected prosecutor. I was a career prosecutor.
He got elected. You guys are running against each other.
Yeah, well, I thought he was pretty good at the time. I'm not saying he wasn't, but he quit the prosecutor's office halfway through his term. And when he left, he kind of left the office in bad shape, and Kim Worthy's been dealing with it ever since. But putting all that aside, it was a great job. And then someone said, you'd be a great attorney general. And I'm like, but I've never run for politics, right? It's like I'm 40 years old. I've never run for politics.
Yeah.
I got 4 kids. And I thought about it and said, why not me, right? And why not step up and take a shot? And you know how it is, your big case. We did the U of M case together,
yeah,
right?
We did.
And a lot of times in life, you get someone comes through the door, or a problem gets dropped on your lap, and it's like, I can address it. I can answer that. I can fix that problem, and I can make it better. And that's the call I had to be attorney general, and I loved it.
When were you, and like you, by the way, I have a similar background, didn't have a silver spoon. My dad always pushed me to work and keep going to school, keep learning. Right. So it does instill, I think, a work ethic when you have to earn it, right? I mean, we were poor. My mom worked in the steel mill in Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania. We came to Michigan for my dad's first job. He was the first one in the family to go to college. My dad's family.
That's how it was for my brother, Sean. He was the first one. Same thing.
And so, I don't know. I appreciate, it's hard at the time, but now looking back, I'm like, I don't think I'd be the human being I am if I hadn't had to go through that adversity and experiences. You know what I mean?
Absolutely. And I know you've had a lot of great lawyers on here before, and trials are so literally trying on the lawyers and on the parties. And so you have to have intestinal fortitude.
They take a lot out of you.
They take a lot out of you, and sometimes you take a beating one day, and you got to come back the next day and be able to go
and
back at it.
Put a smile on, yeah.
Absolutely. There was a Judge George Crockett, that I was in front of a lot in old Detroit Recorder's Court, and
what is Recorder's Court? Because it's for though I never practiced it. I just hear stories about this old Recorder's Court in Detroit, this old mysterious court.
Yeah, it's crazy. So if you go to Ford Field It's kitty corner to Ford Field, the building there. It's across from where they were going to build the Wayne County Jail. It's 12 stories, and it was a building filled of gladiators and arenas, right? And it's George Crockett. In Recorder's Court, it used to be just all Detroiters. And so most of the time when
Civil or two, or what was it?
Just criminal.
Just criminal stuff.
It was, the law got changed 20 years ago. But up until that time, like it was all Detroit juries. And most of the folks cases tried there were out of Detroit, but some from the suburbs. And so it's different than a lot of folks have. So it's primarily all black judges, all black jurors. And folks who, had to deal with so many problems, but it really was a great place to learn how to be a trial lawyer, and you had to be prepared. I mean, there were times people brought weapons. My brother
into the courthouse.
Yeah, they got through security. My brother Sean, when he was a Recorder's Court judge, his deputy got attacked with a knife in the courtroom.
No way.
No, absolutely. There was times,
it's like the Wild West.
When I was trying cases, sometimes fist fights would break out in the hallway and spill into the courtroom. And so we had this Judge Crock, and he used to tell the jurors when we were sitting them to pick them, right? And he'd point over and see Mr. Sharg over there, the defense counsel? Yes. You see Mr. Cox over there, the prosecutor? Yes. And he was really slow talking, deliberate. He goes, they're the gladiators. And right there in front of you, that's the pit. That's the arena where everything's going to happen. And you're just like going to be the people of ancient Rome and watch the lions and Christians go at it. And he got jurors ready. And there were times where, because it was high stakes.
Yeah.
Right? Murder trials. I tried a guy who was a gang leader in Southwest Detroit who's called King Chewy. King Chewy. So his name was Jesus
like
Garcia.
Chewy from like Star Wars, Chewbacca?
Yes.
Okay,
yes.
yeah.
And he came from Chicago, and he set up a branch of the Insane Spanish Cobras. And literally they had a house on Chopin Street where they meet on Sunday nights.
The Insane Spanish Cobras?
Yes. And literally 60 young men would go there, a few women, and they would have notebooks and they had creeds. And that's the kind of crazy stuff you saw there. Right?
Yeah. That's wild. Yeah, that's I've heard a lot of stories about Recorder's Court, from back in the day and the wild stuff.
Yeah.
So you went from the prosecutor, and then tell us, what was it like being the attorney general? Because that's technically, I think, the biggest law firm in the state of Michigan, really, if you consider it a firm, right? I mean, didn't you have hundreds of lawyers there?
Yeah, we did. Unfortunately, during the time I was there, was called the Lost Decade under Governor Granholm. And so we actually had to cut our head count by 20%, but while our cases went up. But I have to tell you, that was an incredibly fulfilling job. It's both political and serving the people and being a lawyer. And so there was ups and downs, right? It's like through the day. But every day I went to bed, put my head on the pillow, and I slept like a baby because I felt that the team I had and the people in the office and I were doing the Lord's work.
What type of stuff? Tell us about some crazy cases while you were attorney general. I think, although I'm not certain, and I didn't ask you about this,
right.
One of the reasons with these traffic lights is you wrote an opinion that said it was unconstitutional because, some places like you go to DC,
right.
They're taking pictures of you in your car and of your plate, and then they're mailing you tickets and they're getting it to the wrong people.
Right.
And it's like, wait, this isn't me,
Right.
Did you have anything to do with that?
I did. Yeah. So there's a thing called an attorney general opinion where a legislator will ask you to give an opinion to clear up something. Without
to see if it's
lawsuit.
legal or not.
Yeah, and so one of them was some cities wanted to go to the automatic stop sign or stoplights where they take a photo of a license and tag you, right?
You'd probably make a lot of money for the cities there.
Exactly, and you wouldn't get a hearing in district court or whatever. And so I looked at the law, and it's like, hey, you're like acting, tyrannical, right? And so we issued an opinion. It was kind of funny. I kind of a side benefit, State police would never stop me after that because they all love that law because they get overtime. But the reality, it was just not. It was wrong, right?
Yeah.
It was a lack of due process. But there were other like big issues, and that was a big issue. But the big issues like dealing with charter schools. In the city of Detroit, half the kids go to charter schools, and early on in that time, public schools were saying, "Well, if you leave, you can't come back."
What do you mean if you leave
a public school? and go to a charter school,
You can't go back to the.
you can't go back to the public school.
How could they say that? I thought you
Well,
could always.
it was bullshit, right? And so I issued an opinion. It was a huge issue in the early 2000s, and that really kind of helped the charter school movement boom. And people may have ideas about that, but the reality is, in so many urban areas, charter schools delivered kids, right? Gave them an option, gave parents an option where they couldn't move, right? And so that's something I'm very proud of. There's others, we used to give driver's license to illegals without any legal reason, and actually Michigan law was against it, and so I did that or stopped that practice. But there was a day-to-day stuff. Like the one thing a former governor told me, he said, as governor, I could do anything I wanted, and metaphorically.
Yeah.
But I can't do everything. So he said, make sure you're prioritized. And one thing I campaigned on, and from being in recorder's court, so many of the primarily young dudes, young men, primarily young African-American guys, didn't have a second parent, right? And of course, didn't have financial resources and weren't getting child support. But it really, nowadays, that cuts across every ethnic group. And so we started the first child support felony unit, and people said, well, you're going to go after people who don't have money. I said, no. So we did what private business did. We went out and got a credit service license, and we'd only go after you if you had a credit score, right?
Yeah. Money.
Because it'd be a waste of resources. It wasn't about locking up poor guys who couldn't make it, but we went out. I mean, we got a neurosurgeon who's making $1 million a year who wasn't paying the, $10,000 a month. We got, Benny Blades, a bunch of Lions fans went after me after that. But, we Andrew Toney, who was heavyweight champion of the world. But part of it changed the ethic. And after that, family court judges say, well, sir, I know you have money and you don't want the attorney general's office to go after you, and continue with Bill Schuette and now Dana Nessel. And in direct dollars, they've collected $500 million for over 100,000 kids. But it's also about the message. It's kind of like, I always wanted to change the culture, kind of like drunk driving, Mothers Against Drunk Driving did. And that was something I have women, primarily sometimes guys, and sometimes people who are children. I'll be in the grocery store, I'll be Bush's or Kroger's, and someone will come up and tell me their story, years later now. And that is, I didn't make money at that, but it pays me benefits that I reap every single day.
Yeah.
I haven't touched people.
Not an easy job, managing all those lawyers. And I've got a lot of cases.
Lawyers are hard to manage.
Yes, they are. Yes, they are. So tell me about some of your big case. I know you had some serial killers that you put in jail?
Yeah. So crazy story. There was all the cable news stations were talking about this guy, Coral Watt, who went to prison, who admitted to killing 50 women in prison.
Did he really do it?
Yes. 50 women in Texas, right? And he got sentenced in the 80s. And but there was a procedural error. And it was back during a time where people would get easy plea bargains, even in Texas. And so he was
that sounds like a whole different world.
A whole different world, 180 degrees from what it is today. And so, long story short, he was going to get out after 20 years.
And he killed 50 women?
He admitted to 50 women.
That's crazy.
And so there was an Ann Arbor, later became the chief, but a detective from the 70s looked at him. And he strangled women. He also used the knives. And Coral Watt. And so anyway, he was about to get out. And this Ann Arbor, then retired chief, contacted the office and said, can you start taking a look? Because I started a cold case unit, I brought
cold case units, like cases that haven't been solved, right?
Yeah.
Like
we got murders solved from like 30 years before.
Yeah.
So we started looking at it.
Did this guy, was he in Michigan at some point too?
He was. He started off in Michigan. He grew up in Inkster in Detroit.
Okay. So then that's the connection.
And he kind of migrated to Texas. So when he was a young man, crazy story. Dan Abrams, who used to be on MSNBC, right? And
I remember.
And he's on the network with Cuomo now.
Right.
At any rate, so he interviewed me on national TV one night, and we're talking about the case, and there were prosecutors across the country trying to figure out how do we stop this serial killer from getting out in like 3 months. And
that's crazy, bro.
Crazy.
I mean,
so I'm on this station, and I'm talking to him about it, and talking about our efforts. We have a task force. We're looking at all these cases in Westland, Saline, and Ann Arbor.
Like unsolved murders that matched kind of his MO. Modus operandi.
Yes.
Operandi. Whatever.
Yeah, in terms of like breaking in through a window, using a knife, or strangling. A couple times he got people in alleys. So
like Jack the Rippers.
Yes, this guy Joe, and I'm sorry Joe because he's a hero. I'm just blanking on his last name. Right? He calls our office the day after I'm on national cable.
Who's Joe?
TV.
Just like Joe the plumber out there?
Yes, Joe the plumber, just a good dude. And he calls the office and he says, I witnessed him murder a woman in the alley in Ferndale off 8 Mile in 1979, October of 1979. I'm like, what? And first he called for me, right? And he's like, I can only talk to Cox.
And you probably get a lot,
Yeah,
like,
you got a lot of calls, right?
Yeah.
And
like I stubbed my toe on a can of baked beans.
Yeah, exactly.
Okay.
So, and whatever. So I called him back, right? And I'm like, and he's describing it. I'm saying, no shit. And he goes, and you know what? Here's what he looked like. And I gave, they did like you see in the old movies, the sketch artist, right?
Yeah.
And so, lo and behold, we get the file from Ferndale police.
Why didn't this guy report this?
He did, but they had no suspect.
Oh, okay.
And it had been
so he's
30,
like, I told them 30 years ago.
Yes. And 30 years had passed by, and there was no reason. It wasn't a bad, nothing wrong with Ferndale police.
Yeah,
right?
yeah.
So we called Ferndale. We got the police jack. We look at it, and John, no shit, the sketch looked just like Coral Watt did. At the time.
From like 30 years ago.
From 30 years ago.
No way.
And then we investigated, and then we found some physical evidence, and ultimately we convicted him in Oakland County. Then
did you have to try the case? Or
I did
your
not.
Office?
Because I had almost 300 lawyers
Yeah.
at the time.
Yeah. So this was when you were the attorney general.
Yeah.
Oh,
so
wow.
But I would get really involved. I pushed my prosecutors, and we just had a number of cases like that.
So you convicted him?
Convicted him, and then later he pled to another murder in Kalamazoo. We uncovered.
Crazy. That's crazy.
Yeah, and
they should do a Netflix of that.
They did.
Okay.
In fact, there was a guy, Tom Henderson, who wrote a number of books on our cold cases. One was Mark Unger, who pushed his wife off a dock in Benzie County. He was from Huntington Woods. It was a huge story.
What was that? What happened with that? I think I remember that name.
Yeah. So Mark Unger was pretty prominent. Right, and Mort Meisner is pretty big in town. Was a friend of his.
Yeah, oh yeah.
And so that was the case. We just unraveled it. We had a case of Janet Chandler who was killed in 1978 when I was a sophomore in high school, and in Holland, Michigan, by 6 itinerant workers. No one had any idea. We unraveled that. Got that solved in 2007.
How did you solve that case? How was she killed? She was killed at work?
She was killed at work. She was a night clerk at a motel all by herself, and so there's no witnesses.
Holland, Michigan isn't known for a lot of crazy murder. I mean, I grew up in Grand Rapids.
Right.
It's a little more
a beautiful town, nice people, and it was a blotch. And they had detectives, and so when we started getting these other cases, retired detective who'd been there for 30 years, who worked on the case, reached out to us and gave us some ideas. And we just started pulling on the threads, right? And unraveling, we convicted 5 people. And
those cold cases, I just watched this Netflix this week about a cold case on HBO. It was like the yogurt shop murders. I don't know.
Yes, yeah. I haven't seen it yet. My wife's watched it. Yeah,
it's good, but I mean, this cold case, it's so hard because it's like, haven't you ever seen the show The First 48?
Yes.
It's like you must, if the evidence goes missing, people go missing, memories fade, people's interest fades. So, I mean, isn't it just tremendously difficult to pick up a cold case and solve it from 30 years ago? When you were a sophomore?
100%. And I'll give you like in Detroit, which unfortunately they have too many murders. But when I was running the homicide unit, when I was just a regular homicide prosecutor, it's kind of a funny term. But, we'd have Detroit homicide detectives who worked in this building, 1300 Beaubien, right across from our building. And like those dudes would come in. Sometimes they'd be up for the prior 90 hours. Because that first 48, that's so true. Because if you can't wrap it up in the first 48 hours, it's an incredibly steep hill to climb.
Like
a
people can like get rid of evidence,
yeah,
right?
it's a little different now because, with DNA and other things.
Yeah.
But it's still extremely difficult. If you can't nail it down the first 2 or 3 days, it's extremely tough.
That's when I have a big case, like a trucking case or any type of big catastrophic injury case. I tell my guys, they're like, well, let's do this. I said, get out there right now.
Yeah.
Get your investigator out there. The cameras, all the little things. Cameras can start overriding themselves. Witnesses fade or go away or die or get sick or forget. You got to go now.
Well, the case we did together, against University of Michigan and Dr. Anderson, right? That was a cover-up of a couple decades.
So, let's talk about that because, I always knew you, but I kind of knew you from afar more.
Right.
I really got to know you a lot better and see your work ethic and integrity and leadership abilities on a personal level through this Dr. Anderson case, which I became involved in. And that's, I think, when we really worked together closely on that case. Tell for those who don't know out there, this was a huge case.
A huge case. So everyone knows about Larry Nassar and MSU.
Yeah.
Well, Larry Nassar, and this never got in the media, Larry Nassar was an undergrad at University of Michigan, wanted to go to med school. And as a sophomore, he was a student trainer on the U of M football team in 1983. And the team physician was Dr. Robert Anderson. And so, long story short, on February 19th of 2020, right before we go into COVID, Detroit News has a story that U of M had been investigating old reports of this doctor who abused students and athletes. And then I had a very close friend.
And Dr. Anderson was dead at the time,
right? He had been dead since 2010, right?
Yeah.
And he had started work September 1 in 1966.
Wow.
Retired with honors. They honored him when he retired January 1 of 2003. So 37 years. And as you and I did the work, we unraveled with 63 other attorneys. That was hard.
Yeah. That was the hardest part of the case.
Yeah.
You think it's hard working with defense counsel? Try 63 plaintiffs' lawyers.
Yeah. And but we were all one team and wanted the right thing. We represented 1,000.
That thing wouldn't work like that without you. You were like,
thank you. Really we had a lot of good guys. Mick Graywall, Rick Schulte and Parker Steiner, you and other folks. But it was so ultimately we pulling on the threads. And you and I both know, like civil cases, they die after 6 years usually, right?
Yeah, right.
But there's a thing in Michigan law, it's been around for 100 years, which if a defendant fraudulently conceals evidence of a claim, then the statute of limitations stops. And so
because the normal rule is after a certain amount of time, 3 years, whatever it is, 3 years for general negligence, you can never bring a claim again. So you get hit by a car and you wait 3 years and 1 day, no matter how bad it was, no matter how evil, the truck guy could have been high, whatever, you're done. You can't go to court, right? Because you have a time limit to bring a lawsuit. But you were genius on this.
Well, it's kind of, when that article appeared, I had a couple buddies. So I was in the Marines out of high school for 3 years. I show up on Mason Hall, like the first week of class, and I got a big dumbass Marine tattoo on my arm, right?
Yeah.
And so this huge 6'6" lineman sits next to me, and then there's a wrestler sits next to him. So they started talking to me, and so through them, I became buddies with a lot of football players and a lot of wrestlers in the '80s, right? And so they started calling me and started telling me about their experience, and they thought they were like.
So when this article broke, your buddies from college who had been abused by Anderson started calling you?
Yeah, and part of it was like so like there was a guy who, Dr. Anderson, and I don't know the rating on this, but Dr. Anderson did a fake prostate exam on him and made him ejaculate through a fake prostate exam.
He was sticking his fingers in their anuses.
In their anus.
And how many people did he do this to?
That ejaculation may be 15%, but hundreds, thousands. In fact, U of M had to report like 1,800 reports, right?
Of boys
and some young women. Primarily, he was He was a homosexual predator, right?
Yeah.
And we had a lot of breaks as the news got out there. People called us. I don't know if you remember, there was a guy, Keith Morey, who was a young gay man at the time, went to a sexual minority clinic in the evening and was abused by Dr. Anderson. And imagine this, in 1981, he's gay, and he reports it. And Dr. Anderson...
To U of M?
To U of M. He works his way all the way up to Vice President Easthope, a number 3 guy in the university who I later deposed. And and we preserved his testimony before he died. He was in his 80s. And he reported it, and he still had the paperwork. And if you remember, Dr. Easthope we found through discovery paperwork that he had been fired the year and a half before. So literally U of M had fired him a couple times and brought him back. And then when he kept preying on the general population, what do? They make him the first full-time athletic team physician in America, where of course he was around all these fit young men who he just went to town over.
You know, when I first heard about this case, I got to tell you, I was skeptical. I was skeptical for a lot of reasons.
Yes.
Number one, I was thinking to myself, how in the world could someone in a position of authority at a major university, one of the biggest universities in the country, be doing this, sexually abusing these kids for decades and get away with it? I mean, how did this go on for so long?
Well, you know, I lived through the 70s and 80s, high school, college, and I was a prosecutor. And there was this ethic of don't talk about anything you're not supposed to talk about. And so he was the number 1 doctor. He ran the health services. He was the team physician. They would take him to the Rose Bowl, the Orange Bowl, Fiesta. He was celebrated. Yeah. Right? They would put him in his annual reports, highlighted. And he gave free medical service to all the vice presidents and the presidents of the university. So I don't know what he knew, but no one ever made an effort. And these athletes in different sports would complain, and their coaches didn't know better, would poo-poo it.
Yeah.
And it's like they didn't know, right? What's proper, what's not. And it all happened in a medical office. And so there was this like zone of, it was a natural cover-up, because if he had a white coat on, these guys would assume, God, that was strange, or that's why. It's like,
because they had never had an exam before.
Exactly.
A lot of these kids were from like, you know, rural areas and stuff.
Yeah,
right?
or like, working class folks, factory workers' kids.
Yeah.
And it's like one guy told me after Dr. Anderson ejaculated him, and he told him, I'm trying to help clean out your prostate. And then he told this guy who was a star football player, and he says, I'm walking across the diag, and I see the undergrad library, and I see the graduate library, and he says to me, Mike, where would I go to look up what just happened to me? And if I could figure out, I thought it was wrong, but I didn't know any better, and I'm just a dumbass 19-year-old football player. And he goes, and then who would I tell? What coach could I actually explain it to if I figured it out? You know, there was no internet then.
Yeah.
And no sex education.
Right.
And there was no good touch, bad touch. All that came later.
Yeah.
Right? And so as you had, I think, 25 clients. You know, I had a couple hundred others. It's like, and they're different. Some were damaged. Some were damaged a lot.
Yeah, that's right. I was very skeptical too. Okay, when I heard about it, and I said, you know, all right, well, why? How could this happen to thousands of people without more people speaking out?
Yeah.
And how did this really go on? But once I started talking to these guys and I sat down with them, and a lot of these guys are really successful people now, financial advisors, lawyers. Some have been devastated. I mean, some can't work, but there were similar stories that came out, just like you said, like it didn't seem right, but I didn't know what to do. I didn't want to lose my football scholarship.
Yes.
I didn't want to get in trouble like they did something wrong. And then a lot of them, the same stories, I'm scared to go to the doctor now. Like so many, even with their kids, they're like, I will not let my kid go to the doctor alone because they're so paranoid about something happening like happened to them. You know?
Yeah. So I one of my clients was John Vaughn, who did a sit-in and helped bring attention to this. You know, that dude was in the running for the Heisman Trophy. Yeah. But he still felt like, if I broke my ankle or if I talked out, he goes, I always thought this was odd and weird and the stuff, but I didn't know better. I was from a broken home and I wasn't going to challenge a coach. I was just I just wanted to get on the football field and it was the late 80s and no one knew anything about anything, right?
Yeah.
There was no Instagram. There was no social media, nothing, and no internet. And you're right. Some guys prevailed despite it, but so many were broken in ways that weren't apparent. So many guys I had, their wives, when they found out, they would come in, they would unload about, I saw this behavior, or when we were being intimate, he would say no, and it was just like it all became revelatory to them.
Yeah,
and so it was like one of those great fulfilling things, and actually, even if you remember, a regent at the University of Michigan, Ron Weiser, who was a chair at the time, said when he was a wrestler in the 60s that Dr. Anderson abused him, and he didn't realize it. And this is a guy who later led the university and was a billionaire and pretty sophisticated.
Yeah.
But it was part of the era, and this Dr. Anderson, as you know, was just one sneaky bastard.
He was a weird dude. He did weird stuff. I mean, some of my guys, I remember one of my guys, he made him wear a old Greek running thing over his privates, like a little sheath, and then run around in front of him and told him it was to study aerodynamics of Greek running. I mean, this dude was just so weird. He had inserted rods and stuff in other people. He was a sick dude.
And it goes back to the deference also that society has had traditionally to doctors.
Yeah.
I mean, you're a star in your field, right? When you go to a restaurant, you're Jon Marko or whatever. Doctors still have Dr.
Yeah,
John
Dr.
Smith,
So-and-so,
and that's a carryover. I have nothing against that, but you have to realize that was part of that time. You didn't question your parents, you didn't question your coach, you didn't question your professor,
especially
you certainly didn't
they're
question.
Young. And they're at this football program where they're like, this is the dream come true, right? Like, 100%. I don't want to do anything to mess this up.
Yeah.
So this was not an easy case. So, people hear about this. Okay, thousands of people were abused. The university knew about it. They kept them there. They didn't do anything. They covered it up. That should be an easy case, but it wasn't.
It wasn't. They hired some star attorneys from Jones Day out of D.C., and they tried to grind us down. But we got a couple depositions early on. We deposed Mr. Easthope and Vice President Johnson, and they really gave us what we needed to establish a cover-up. And as you know, a lot of times in civil litigation, then it's a game of chicken, all right? And it's like, and ultimately, U of M did the right thing and said, we need to resolve this.
And it wasn't a good look for the university, even if they were able to somehow get that case thrown out of court based on a legal technicality. I don't think it would have been a good look for them because it's their own students, many of whom were still, despite all the abuse they had suffered, still go blue.
Yeah, so many of them are like leaders in the alumni community, right?
Yeah.
And love the university and will be at the game tonight.
Yeah.
Now we're filming on the day of the U of M Oklahoma game or sent their kids there, right?
Yeah.
And your viewers or listeners, you can imagine the kind of conflict in their heads, emotionally, intellectually, having lived through abuse, but still embracing university. And that's part of how people deal with things, and part of as a lawyer, sometimes you're an amateur psychologist.
Yeah.
When you're picking a jury or when you're dealing with a witness or dealing with your client who, even in business fights, clients where it's like, let's just split the dollar.
Yeah.
Clients will get really emotional.
Never that easy.
It's never that easy. Yeah.
So tell us about, look, normal case that we have. You've done a lot of cases, right. Criminal, civil. You make decisions, you litigate the case. Tell everybody how difficult it was when you had how many lawyers, how many different law firms, not lawyers.
Well, there was 63 of us. And a lot of alphas, right?
Yeah.
And
a lot of people used to being in charge, right?
Absolutely.
But how do you manage that? Because you were kind of the top leader guy.
Well, I got appointed with Mick Graywall, Rick Schulte, and Steve Drew and Parker Steiner. But yeah, I tried to organize it, and it was a rocky ride.
Yeah.
But ultimately, most all the lawyers, including myself, had to pull back their egos some in order to, and it really was a team effort. Like when I'm running right now, people say for governors, well, how could you deal with the legislature, especially if it's mixed Democrats, Republicans, or you're a Republican, it's all Democrats. I'm like, hey, I dealt with 63 lawyers and leading that group to get the second or third largest settlement in Michigan history. It's like that gave me all the training I need.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, it was difficult with all those moving parts. I find it, and I've been in some, that was the biggest one that I've been in with 63, but I'm in some right now with like 5 different firms. Right. Even that's difficult because when you have one unitary leader making decisions, right or wrong, right or wrong, decisions get made, there's swift action. When you have 63 people in a peanut gallery, it's harder to get things done.
And like you said, all these men and women are used to sticking up for themselves and their clients in the courtroom.
Yeah.
And there was some scorching conversations, and some of them in front of all 63.
Yeah.
But ultimately, we all got the idea we had to get this thing done because morally it was the right thing. Look, the lawyers made money, made a lot of money. The clients did well, especially given the passage of time, and didn't have to go to trial and have to expose themselves. But it was the right thing, and I think the university is better for it.
Yeah, I agree.
But like I'm involved in a little different fight where I'm not the leader. Camp Lejeune cases, the toxic water. So
tell our viewer this is big, okay?
It's massive.
And tell our listeners what is Camp Lejeune and what is going on.
Well, it harkens back to a day when governmental institutions would just shit on individuals, right? And pardon my French, but
that's okay. Your case has gone wild.
All
Mike.
right.
You're okay.
So when I was in the Marines, I was proud. I got my Marine tattoo, the eagle, and a USMC and death before dishonor. And I'm at 19. I was fired up, and I'm in Camp Lejeune training.
You were actually at Camp Lejeune.
I was in Camp Lejeune.
Where is, for our listeners?
So it's in North Carolina,
and it's a military training camp.
It primarily, really, yes. So it did the initial amphibious training that led to the U.S. wins in the South Pacific.
So this is like boot camp, like we see on G.I. Jane or Full Metal Jacket or something?
You go there after boot camp, right?
Okay.
And it's a couple hundred square miles. There's a similar Camp Pendleton over in California. At any rate, millions of Marines, some sailors, because sailors were corpsmen, and family members that lived there, right? And so I was there a total of 5 months, and thankfully nothing happened to me. But I was there 82, 83. In the 60s, people started to notice some things wrong. 70s, they started to get a little more definitive. By the late 80s, there were studies done by the Department of Defense, the Department of Navy.
Department of War now, by the way.
Department of War, yes. And by the way, anyway, that's a conversation for another day.
Part 2, that's
part 2.
That's when you come back.
That is. And so what would happen is, well, look, Marines pride themselves on how they look, right?
Yeah.
And our dress blues and everything.
Yeah.
So, our camis, we wash them, we iron them ourselves in the barracks with 80 dudes, all living together. But, we get stuff dry cleaned. The dry cleaner, huge, massive thing. It was old days, they just take all their fluid and dump it in the grass.
What type of fluid?
It was like PCEs.
So chemicals. This isn't this isn't Downy cleaner. Like
heavy cleaning fluids, right? And same at the motor transportation pool. And same when they would dump munitions in the ground, bury munitions, shells, things like that.
Like Agent Orange and stuff like that?
Not Agent Orange, but other things, more basic. And
so like antifreeze and all kind of bad stuff?
Everything like that. And what made Camp Lejeune different is we're right next to the Atlantic Ocean, right? And so the soil, most Army, Navy, defense installations have a certain amount of pollution. This was crazy because of the soil. And what would happen is that that laundry fluid would go right into the aquifers, and we'd be drinking it, unknown.
It would go into the water supply.
Yes.
And how long was this camp there where all this chemicals and pollutants were being dumped?
It started in December of 51 all the way to the end of 1987.
Oh my God.
So
the whole time they're just dumping, or most of the time they're dumping these chemicals.
In other places didn't matter because the way the terrain and dirt and geology was. So the bottom line is the government knew about this for 30 years, had all these studies, kept it in 2008, 9.
Why didn't they do anything about it? It's so sad. These are the men and women fighting, giving their lives for the country, and they can't get some clean water. I mean, it's just despicable. This is why people don't trust and have disdain for corporations and the government in certain situations.
100%. And in this case, it was earned. And ultimately, so President Biden, who wasn't a fan of, but he and the Republicans in the House and Senate got together, and they opened a 2-year window for impacted Marines from Camp Lejeune, nowhere else, Camp Lejeune, because it was such a toxic waste dump, to sue. And so, because I've been a Marine, I was AG, a lot of, I ended up having a couple hundred clients. I have 218 guys, a lot of women, family members who've
because their family lived there too.
Yeah, so family members would have claims. There was a thing. There was this Tarawa Terrace where families would live. There was a cemetery nearby. Camp Lejeune had the highest infant mortality rate in the country forever.
In the country,
yes. And
what kind of sickness? Like, we've seen Aaron Brockovich, we've seen a civil action. I don't know if you've ever seen it, but like, what type of diseases or conditions was this chemicals causing to the service?
Well, it would cause infants' death in the womb.
Oh my God!
But the primary for adults is like Parkinson's,
horrible,
esophageal cancer,
horrible,
bladder cancer, kidney cancer, male breast cancer. A number of neurological diseases. There are 11 primaries that the government has already admitted to. That was directly caused by Camp Lejeune toxic water. And then there's what we call Tier 2, another 14, where there's some evidence and there's ongoing studies. So
that's horrible.
This must be the largest litigation in American history. There's 410,000 claims. In our leadership group, and so this is a time where I'm kind of the tail, and so there are folks and tremendous, former Republican Solicitor Generals, former Democrat Solicitor Generals, who have joined this fight because it's the right thing to do by these Marines. And so many of I have a family. I have a guy who's elected official. Great guy, very conservative. Not he's not litigious. Never complains about anything.
Yeah.
He grew up there. His dad was first sergeant, and 5 siblings have been impacted by Camp Lejeune water because they were young kids growing up there.
It can ruin generations. I mean, it's horrible.
It really is horrible. And so, quite frankly, it shapes part of my running now because, I'm much more skeptical of institutions, big governments, big utilities, and they need to be held to account.
Yeah,
it's important. People talk about trial lawyers, and I do a lot more defense side stuff, but some plaintiff side stuff. But I say, hey, there's Abraham Lincoln is the model for America, and he was a trial lawyer.
That's right. That's right. It's really sad to hear that, and it's really kind of disgusting to hear this. And just so our listeners know, if you're in the military and you get hurt by the military's negligence, you can't sue the military, right? There's immunity doctrine.
Yes, there's an immunity doctrine. This particular statute exempted
just for Camp Lejeune.
Just for Camp Lejeune. But it's kind of interesting. So I have an autistic granddaughter.
I didn't know that.
Yeah, and she's in Mississippi, and she's done really well over the course of her education there. But just yesterday, or there's these leaks coming out. I don't know if you saw it yesterday, that Robert F. Kennedy is going to come out with some findings about autism and linked to Tylenol.
I read that this morning.
Yeah,
actually.
And it's really kind of interesting, and it's kind of so. I had a lot of friends, including a lot of folks who would poke me all the time about Trump. Because we started in 2020 and we settled in 2023, and then a lot of still working to 2024. But so as you know, I took a lot of grief, and that's okay, and that's who I am. But I'm glad to see, whatever you think of Robert Kennedy, there's some parts of him are like, we have to uncover things that the government's done wrong.
I agree. And like, if there is these things that have been going, like, look at Camp Lejeune. It was going on for decades and decades and decades, and nobody did anything. And I'm sure they were telling the people at the time, oh, it's fine.
Yes.
Right?
Yes.
Just like the Flint water. Oh, it's fine. The water's safe to drink. You got to look at these things. My grandma, I'm paranoid about it. I have like I get water shipped in, like glass water, because I don't want to drink the tap water. And I'm not saying there's anything wrong with it. I drank tap water my whole life, but I just see these things and I'm like, I'd rather be safe than sorry, because I have a distrust when people tell me, oh, it's fine, don't worry. My grandma, we grew up in a suburb of Pittsburgh, right? And my grandma, steel towns.
Right.
So steel towns, the way it worked is all these little suburbs would have a mill at the bottom of the hill by the river, the Allegheny River. They would dump all the bad stuff in the river, and that's everybody worked in the mill or around the mill.
Right.
They'd deliver stuff to the mill or whatever. My grandma, who drank the water her entire life, developed Parkinson's. And look, I don't know. We didn't do a study or a link to it, but I always wonder in the back of my head, they used to have the steel ashes. They'd have to wipe them off the car in the morning because the ashes would come down and cover the cars, and they're breathing that in and they're drinking that stuff. You just never know. We got to look at it. And I agree. I think that whatever you think of, there's other issues, but we should have clean food. We should not get poisoned by our own companies and government.
But despite all this, like, I feel good that life is better in America than it's ever been, right?
Yeah.
We know more, and that's good. It's kind of funny because I was just thinking driving here today. So everyone in my neighborhood worked for Ford or Chrysler, right?
Yeah.
Either in the foundry or assembly line in Dearborn. And the Chrysler guys worked at the stamping plant on the west side of Detroit on McGraw. And I had three friends growing up in my little Catholic grade school over by Rouge Park on the west side of Detroit. We were in Redford. And it's like, two of their dads worked in three of them worked in the stamping plant, and two of them walked around deaf as like 40-year-olds because it's all just so loud. And they still went to work every day because that's just what you did.
That's what you did.
And and they don't. I'm sure they wouldn't regret it, but it's it's the things that get hidden that when they're uncovered that need to be addressed. And so that's like when I was investigating crimes, that was part of the challenge was, do right by my clients and put the case together, right? But at the same time, as a prosecutor, you have obligation to the justice system. So at the same time, if the case falls apart, that you'll feel bad, and you feel bad for the victims, but you have to let it. You have to be upfront about it.
Yeah. Right? So we got time for one more, I think. Somebody told me that you were on Dateline, or you had some case related to with that Catch a Predator.
Yes. Remember Chris Hansen?
Yeah. Had to have like the pedophiles come in and be like, "Hey, sit down. How you doing? How you doing? Come on, sit down."
So when because I had this criminal prosecutor thing, we started the first statewide internet predator unit in the country, right? And so we invited Chris Hansen in because we'd have these things and get these guys online. And so we're in February. We're in a house in Belleville.
And Chris Hansen was Dateline, right? And
he was the star. Like, he was a massive celebrity 15 years ago.
And then did pretend like there was an 8-year-old or whatever, right?
Yes. So we would have our investigators be online in chat rooms and be a 14-year-old girl or whatever. Yeah. And these guys would start hitting on them and want to have sex, and I'll come meet you and whatever. And so we did a house and we snagged 30 of them one Saturday afternoon. And it's like,
that's scary. 30.
Literally we had a dude show up. One of the dudes showed up. It was winter time coat, his parka, and he had World's Best Dad t-shirt.
Oh my God. You got to be kidding me.
No, and another dude rode a bike through like 15-degree weather, and he had a flat tire like a quarter of a mile away, and still rode on the rims and got there.
Oh
it
my
was
God.
stunning.
Things that they were, the amount of effort putting in.
Yeah. So the flip side, I started this CSI cyber safety initiative for kids, and Dana Nessel still continues. It's educated hundreds of thousands of kids. So, hey, parents out there, think about guys riding through 15-degree weather on a bike with a flat tire to try and get to your kid.
Yeah.
And just be ever vigilant with your kids online.
I mean, did some of these things, like coming from a civil background, where I see some of the have you ever seen the movie Final Destination, any of those movies? It's like the craziest things happen. Like this camera would fall down and a piece would come out and kill you. Like, it's just like these like crazy ways that like, I see that everywhere because of the danger and what I do, I see like, I have somebody who's, falls and gets impaled on some weird thing because it's sticking out. Like, you would never think about it. So with my kids, I'm paranoid. I'm like, wear a helmet, be careful with this because I'm always scared. I don't want them to end up like some of my clients, right?
Yeah, no.
I
feel like a bad parent now. I keep pushing my kids out there. But
doesn't it? I mean, doesn't some of those experiences, like 30 pedophiles in one day, doesn't that make it a little? Has that shaped, how you parent and look?
It did. Like, it was like I paid a little more attention than I otherwise would have, right? And,
yeah.
But part of the kids have to experiment and grow. But
right.
you need guardrails for them.
It's the balance, right?
Yeah, it's the
you
balance.
want them to get hurt, just not too bad.
Yeah, and it's harder and harder, if you have a preteen right now, like the whole fight with their phone.
Yeah.
Right? And I get it. That's so hard because the phone can unlock great worlds for them, but it also has these incredible dangers for them.
It's finding a balance.
Finding a balance, yeah.
Well, Mike, thanks for coming on the show. Thanks for everything that you've done for the citizens and the people of the state of Michigan, and that you'll hopefully continue to do.
Absolutely. And thanks for your great work on the U of M case and for what you do.
Yeah, thanks, Mike.
All
right. And so we're going to have to, so now that we're over part two.
Part two, yeah. Yeah, actually, I want to hear about your case with the COVID religious objectors. That's really fascinating.
It was a very meaningful case, and we'll save that for part two.
All right. Good deal,
thanks,
man.
Mike. All right, everyone, a big special thanks to Mike Cox for being our special guest today on Cases Gone Wild. It was a great show. Make sure you share the show with your friends and family. Anybody who might be interested in what we have, you can give us a big thumbs up online. If you or someone you know needs help, or you need to get connected to Camp Lejeune or any of the other issues that we talked about today, please don't hesitate to reach out. 313 all sevens. That's 313-777-7777, or go to our website, markolaw.com. We'll see you here in another 2 weeks for another Cases Gone Wild.